Hey, Luke here at the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel, and we are talking about tinder. No, we're not swiping left or right. We're lighting stuff on fire. Now, we've done a lot of fire tutorial videos. I've shown you guys how to build fires in the pouring rain. I've showed you guys the best ways to start fires without using matches. So today, we're gonna talk about picking the right tinder. Well, there's a lot of different ways to start a fire, and depending on which tools you're using, depends on which tinder is right for you. Whether you're using flint and steel, ferrous rods, matches, or a lighter. So I've tried to gather up every conceivable fire starter known to man, whether it's commercial, store-bought, man-made, or all natural, and we're gonna experiment with all of them and see which work best for all the different fire starting techniques. And we're gonna go quick because we got a lot to cover.
The first tinder we're going to review is char cloth. It's just charred cloth. It's used to catch sparks and turn them into embers. You put it inside your tinder, you blow, boom, fire. You can't ignite most tinders with flint and steel, so you need the char cloth to catch that spark and turn it into an ember so then you can make fire. Char cloth's been around for hundreds of years, and it can be made from canvas, linen, or any cotton material. And the weird thing is you can't light it on fire. Char cloth only makes embers. You can make your own char cloth with rags from a linen shirt, put it in a metal tin, heat it up over a torch or a fire until flames start coming out the sides, then blow those out, let it smolder for a few minutes, and the really black charred cloth will work great for catching an ember. Don't use the brown stuff, it will not catch an ember, but those same linen rags make an excellent tinder. They'll actually burn, and they're very windproof. Ferrous rods don't work well with normal linen rags unless you shred them up first, then they work great as a tinder and a fire starter. If you have a knife and some wood, you can make wood shavings, one of my favorite fire starters. It lights easy, it burns hot, and burns a pretty long time. It can't get ignited with just a flint and steel unless you have char cloth. But with a little work, you can ignite dry shavings with a ferrous rod. Let me give you a quick tip about using a ferrous rod. Pull the ferrous rod towards yourself. Don't flick the steel towards the tinder. Doing this busts your knuckles and it knocks your tinder all over the place and puts out your flame. Okay, let's talk cattail fluff. It ignites extremely easy, but it doesn't burn very long, doesn't burn very hot. It's great for using a ferrous rod, but you've got to add something to it to get it to really catch fire. I like to add grass or dry wood shavings, and then it works pretty darn well. I've tried a million times to try to light it with flint and steel, but it just doesn't work. I get almost exactly the same results from cottonwood fluff and thistledown. It ignites really easy, but doesn't burn very hot or long. Okay, this is the shredded bark from an aromatic cedar tree, and it's one of my favorite fire starters. Cedar bark lights easily, it burns reasonably hot and long, and it can be found almost all over the country. Cedar bark is a great tinder if you're using a ferrous rod, and if you're going to be using flint and steel, of course you're going to have to use char cloth to light it. But cedar bark is great for turning an ember into a flame. Pine pitch or pine tar is Mother Nature's napalm, but unfortunately you've got to melt it before it'll catch on fire. Once you do, it burns hot and it burns long. It works best mixed with other things. Fat wood is pine wood saturated with pine tar. You get it from the base of standing dead pine trees. It has a strong pine smell, and when you make little shavings out of it, you can light it with a ferrous rod. When you heat up fat wood, the pine tar oozes out and catches on fire. Fat wood is a great tinder for lighting wet wood on fire. You can often find pine cones with white bits of pine tar stuck in them, and these will work a lot like fat wood. They burn hot and they burn long. This is a quick and easy fire tinder that's great on rainy days. Dry dead pine needles are not a bad fire starter. I like to rough them up a little bit, make sure there's a lot of air inside, and then they burn reasonably well, and they get a good flame, and you can actually start a decent fire with them. Pine needles don't work well with a ferrous rod, but if you've got an ember, you can light them up pretty good. Birch bark is a classic fire starter. There's lots of different types of birches and lots of different types of bark, but they all burn reasonably well. They burn hot and they burn long. If you use the outer bark, which is kind of paper-like or really fine shavings, you can light them with a ferrous rod, and it makes a really good flame. Spanish moss is a really fun fire starter, but you got to use the dead stuff on the left. The stuff on the right is alive and green and will not burn. The dry stuff burns like gasoline. It is crazy how hot and fast it burns. The green stuff doesn't work at all. And it doesn't work with a ferrous rod. Tinder fungus or chaga grows on the side of trees in deciduous forests, and it's a real specialty tinder. It doesn't burn, but it makes incredible, long-lasting embers. And chaga is great for saving and transporting those embers so you can make fire later. Just take a coal or an ember and put it on a piece of chaga and occasionally blow on it, and it'll glow for days.
You know, chaga just smolders really slowly, so you can transport this and carry it through the woods. You can also make your fire, put an ember inside the chaga, go to bed at night, and then when you need to start your fire in the morning, you've got an ember still burning in the chaga. Having a little smoldering chaga around you also can give you a little bit of relief from the mosquitoes, but not much.
Coconut fibers are a great fire tinder. You can ignite them with a match or with a ferrous rod, and they burn really hot and long. Coconut fibers also take an ember really well, so it's great for friction fire methods or using flint and steel. If you got a match or lighter, palm fronds work really great for lighting fires. They're a great tropical tinder that burns hot and long. But normal leaves are not a great tinder. A lot of people try to use them and they start to light and then they smolder. Leaves work a little better if you crinkle them up first, but still they have a tendency of lighting for a few seconds and then just going out and smoldering. Occasionally you can get a good fire off them, but they're one of my least favorite tinders. Lighting dead leaves with a ferrous rod is extremely difficult. Picking up fine, tiny dead sticks off the ground is a much better tinder than leaves. It lights reasonably well with a match or a lighter, and it burns hot and long, and it's the way I start most of my fires. Bird feathers do technically work as a fire starter, but they tend to melt rather than giving off a good flame, and they're really susceptible to going out with even the slightest breeze. They also don't work with ferrous rods. Human hair from my wife's brush works a lot better. It lights pretty easy and it produces more of a consistent flame. You can even light it with a ferrous rod, but the type of hair you use makes a big difference. I experimented with lots of different types of hair. Beaver hair doesn't work very well at all. I can try even lighting it with a match and it didn't work well. Sheep's hair was okay, got the best results, but still not great. And rabbit hair didn't work at all. Alright, let's talk turds. Dried cow poo. It is a great fire starter. It behaves a lot like charcoal. It's a little hard to get started, but once you blow on it a ton, it makes excellent coals that are great for cooking over. One of my favorite natural fire starters is oakum, and it comes from jute or hemp rope, and you just unravel it and make this little rat's nest, and it lights so easily. Even with ferrous rods, it lights so easily. You just unravel the rope and kind of mess it up and get it as scruffy and rat nest-like as you can, and it catches a spark extremely well. It burns long and it burns hot. If you want to put it on a belt sander, you can make super fine oakum that lights really well. If you have an ember, you can put that in the oakum. It lights up really well. Burlap is just made from jute or hemp, and so you can rough it up and turn it into oakum, and it burns really well. Toilet paper, it's the fire starter of Boy Scouts everywhere. It lights extremely easy. It doesn't burn for very long, and the wind likes to blow it away, but you put a little rock on it, and you can even light it with a ferrous rod. All paper products work pretty good as fire starters. However, if you use too much of it, it can produce a lot of ash that can smother the fire. If you rub the newspaper back and forth, it'll get soft like toilet paper, and then you have a good chance of being able to light it with a ferrous rod. The same thing applies to paper towels. They light really well with matches and lighters, and if you want to use a ferrous rod, scuff it up really well, shred it up, and then it'll take a spark decent. Same thing applies with fast food napkins. Scuff them up, shred them up, then you can catch a spark on them. It takes some work, but it does work. You can get the same results with all different types of paper products. The thicker the paper is, the more you have to rough it up and shred it up, but you can get it ignited with a spark. Even cardboard will work if you shred it up and rough it up enough. One of the best tinders to use is pet cage liner made from recycled paper. You can buy it at pet stores or Walmart, and it burns for a really long time, burns reasonably hot, and it takes a spark really well. You can make something similar to this by shredding up a cardboard egg carton. Dried grass works really well as a tinder, especially if it's bone dry and it's very fine. You can light it with a match, you can light it with a lighter, you can even start it with a ferrous rod, and you'll get a pretty decent flame. Coarser grasses like this wheat here, much harder to light on fire. Ferrous rods don't work, but matches and lighters work reasonably well. It burns long, it burns pretty hot, and it makes an okay fire starter. One of my favorite tinders is cotton balls. They're so easy to light, especially when you're using a ferrous rod. It just takes one strike and that's it. But they don't burn all that long. So we add a little bit of petroleum jelly to them and they light just as easily but burn much longer and much hotter. Now the weird part about this is that petroleum jelly doesn't burn well by itself. You try to light it with a match or a lighter and nothing really happens. You have to add some sort of combustible material to it to get it to do anything. While I like to use cotton balls, any type of cotton product works really well. These cotton rounds work great, especially if you tear them apart a little bit. Q-tips work good, especially if you kind of unwind them a bit. Anything that you can find that's made out of pure cotton is going to work really well to light on fire, and if you add a little bit of petroleum jelly to it, it's going to burn even better. Even dryer lint is mostly made out of cotton, and it burns reasonably well. Not quite as well as pure cotton balls, but it'll take a ferrous rod just fine. Steel wool is one of the more unique fire starters we're going to discuss. It's like char cloth on steroids. The smallest spark and it turns into this massing glowing ember, and if you blow on it, it gets crazy huge and hot very quickly. It'll never produce a flame. Even if you expose it to a lighter or a match or throw it in a fire, it'll just make an ember. But this ember can be used to make great fires by mixing it with some sort of combustible material, like wood shavings, for instance. Small spark and boom, you have a great hot fire. You can even make fire with a dead lighter that doesn't have any gas in it. And it works with flint and steel. It's one of the only other tinders that'll actually make an ember with flint and steel. Steel wool is an extremely effective char cloth substitute. Magnesium is another strange fire starter that they sell at the camping stores. You make these little shavings off the backside and you flick it with a ferrous rod and you get a decent little flame that burns really hot. If making your own magnesium shavings is too much work, you can buy your own and they produce a lot of heat, a lot of light. It's particularly effective when you're dealing with wet wood. Match light charcoal briquettes can work pretty well as a fire starter. One single briquette doesn't work very well at all, but if you add a pile of them, then they light quite easily with a match. Breaking up one briquette into a lot of little chunks also works pretty well. Charcoal briquettes burn hot, they burn long, but they don't work well with ferrous rods. The charcoal left over from a fire can be used as a fire starter, but you really need a lighter to do this. You light one corner of it, get a little ember going, and keep blowing until that ember grows and grows until it becomes a flame. If you wake up in the morning and want to restart your fire, this is a great technique for doing that. I've tried many times to start charcoal using just matches, but it's pretty hard to do. Alright, tumbleweeds. They're long pieces of wood shaving soaked in paraffin wax. If you unravel them, you might be able to start it with a ferrous rod. I've done it before, but I couldn't do it for this video. Lights super easy with matches or a lighter. Burns long, burns hot. It's a great and easy way to start a fire. Blackbeard, they advertise a lot online. It's basically rope soaked in some sort of oil. Not that easy to start, actually, even with a match. But once it gets going, it burns really hot and for a very long time. It's like an oil well fire. But you can't use a ferrous rod with it, so that doesn't work. You can dunk it in water and then light it with a match, so that's kind of cool. But that's about it. Not one of my favorite fire starters. This stuff is okay. I mean, it's kind of gooey. It won't start with a ferrous rod. It lights okay with a match. It's, burns a long time. You're supposed to go and light the wrapper and then just build a fire over the top of it, and it works okay. This is my favorite fire starter. The Zips, you can light the wrapper and it just goes and burns for a long time. Very hot. It's also very light. It's made out of like styrofoam and oil, but this stuff does not go out. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's pouring rain, blowing wind, or what. You light that on fire, that is not blowing out at all. It just burns. Look at that. I mean, you could light that in a hurricane and it ain't going out. You can pour water on it. It ain't extinguishing. It's pretty amazing stuff. It lights super easy with a ferrous rod. I couldn't get it to light with just flint and steel, but you can dunk it in water and you can see how light it is. So it doesn't take up a lot of weight in your backpack, but even soaked in water, it'll light, especially if you crumble it up. But even after it was soaked in water, I could light it with the ferrous rod. This stuff is basically cardboard soaked in paraffin or some sort of oil. It worked okay, but after that other stuff, that Zips, I wasn't that impressed. It wouldn't light after it got wet. unless you tore it up into shreds. You could get it to light with the ferrous rod if you shredded it up a little bit, but you can do that with normal cardboard too. This is another Zips product, but a little bit more for fireplaces and less for camping. If you shred it up, you can get it to light with a ferrous rod, but it's difficult. It's lights really easy with a match, burns long, burns hot, like all of these products do. But honestly, none of these were as cool as those little gray styrofoam bricks that Zips make. This is the Zippos lighting paracord, which I did not like. It's stiffer, heavier, and more expensive than normal paracord. You pull it out and there's this one little waxy red thread. You can light it on fire and it makes about as much flame as a birthday candle. It's really not impressive. You compare that to normal paracord and it's even less impressive. So here we go. This is a piece of normal paracord here. I'm pulling out the nylon inside and opening it up. And when you compare the two, I just don't see the advantage of using the Zippo fire paracord. This is another fire tinder I didn't like. It looks like a little cotton round soaked in paraffin. Really hard to light on fire and the shape is weird. You got a little better results if you tore it up first, but it blows out really easy. It doesn't produce a particularly big flame. If you dunk it in water, it won't light. So I really just didn't see the point. But I did like the tin, and it's great for making terre cloth. Let's talk paraffin wax. You can buy it in blocks or in candles. It's a great ingredient in homemade fire starters, but it doesn't burn itself. You have to add it to combustible materials, and then it'll make that material burn longer and brighter, just like this paper towel here. You've got the one on the right is soaked in paraffin, the one on the left is not. And you can see it's also very wind resistant. Paraffin itself doesn't burn. The fumes it gives off when you heat and melt it, that's what catches on fire. When you extinguish this candle and put a match near it, you can see the fumes above the candle light on fire. But a little candle like this under a pile of sticks is a great way to start a fire. Rubbing alcohol or isopropyl alcohol or denatured alcohol will burn very easily, but it doesn't produce a very hot flame or a very long-lasting flame. You can light it with a ferrous rod, which is very convenient, but you can't light it with flint and steel. You can light it with an ember. Anything that contains rubbing alcohol, like hand sanitizer, can also make a flame, but the flame is often invisible and hard to see, which makes it a little bit dangerous. You can even light it when it's on top of water, which is kind of cool when everything's wet. Pretty much any aerosol contains alcohol, including bug repellent and sunscreen, but the flame goes out really quick because it's not pure alcohol, so it's not a very good fire starter. And once the flame goes out, there's a bunch of leftover liquid that acts as a flame retardant, which makes it harder for the wood to catch on fire. If you're going to use aerosol spray cans as a fire starter, you've got to act quickly before all the alcohol evaporates out of it, and you need some sort of secondary tinder to take advantage of that flame. You can ignite aerosols with a ferrous rod. Lamp oil behaves a lot like liquid paraffin. It doesn't light very easily on its own. You expose it to an open flame and not much happens, honestly. But if you combine it with other sort of combustible materials like a cotton swab or some sort of wicking substance, then it burns really well and long and it produces a decent flame. It's not a particularly hot flame, but it's a lot more stable and less dangerous than other petroleum fuels. Lighter fluid is only slightly more volatile than lamp oil. You put a flame on it and not much happens right away until it gets heated up, or you put it over some sort of combustible material. If you put lighter fluid on a piece of towel, for instance, then it burns really well, just like lamp oil. You can actually make a little stove using a wick and a little bit of lighter fluid and a tin can, and it works really well for warming your hands or heating up some water. But be careful, these petroleum products get more dangerous as they get heated up, and they become extremely volatile when warm. The most dangerous fuel is white gas or gasoline. It is extremely volatile and it likes to blow up in your face. You can light gasoline with a ferrous rod, but you have to be careful. The invisible fumes from the gasoline likes to creep out sideways and blow up in your face. You can reduce this by putting the gasoline in a can, and this reduces the oxygen and contains the fumes. But be careful, because if that can tips over, flaming gasoline will spray everywhere and get on people and can light people on fire. It's really dangerous. Don't ever put gasoline onto an existing flame. It'll light your hand on fire. If you accidentally pour gasoline on a hidden ember, it can also catch you on fire. Diesel fuel or kerosene is a much safer alternative. It is nowhere near as volatile. You can't light it with a ferrous rod, and it has trouble even lighting with matches. But kerosene or diesel fuel burns much hotter, burns much longer, and is much safer. Dip any combustible material in diesel fuel and it'll light up like a champ. Even the wettest wood will light on fire with diesel fuel. And you can make a simple hand warmer or heater using a wick and some diesel fuel in a tin can. One strange fire tinder is Fritos. Yes, Fritos. They light on fire surprisingly well. It takes a lighter or a match, but once you get them going, they actually burn quite long and pretty hot. It's great for lighting wet wood on fire. They don't work with ferrous rods, but they are edible. Hey, buddy, you want some snacks? However, I prefer Doritos. I think they light easier, they produce a bigger, hotter flame, and they taste better. I've never been able to light Doritos with a ferrous rod. Another fire starter I like better than Fritos is Cheetos. Because of their shape, they just burn a little bit better. Any sort of potato chip, especially the thin ones, will burn really well. The wavy ones will also burn, but just not quite as well. Also, thicker potato chips, like the homemade style, don't burn as well. And the flavorings don't seem to matter all that much. The barbecue flavor works just as good as sour cream and onions. The Pringles don't work as well, but I think they're a little bit more processed.
One of the reasons why Fritos and potato chips make such good fire starters is because they're bone dry. On a rainy day when everything's soaking wet, you can pull out a little bag of Fritos, pop that open, and you've got bone dry fire starter.
One of the best food fire starters are these little veggie straws. Because they're hollow or something, they lit really easy and they burn really well. Rice cakes also burn really well. The less coating or flavoring they have on them, the better they work, especially if they don't have any sugar on them. Potato sticks also burned really well, though this is a little bit less common of a food thing. Popcorn was probably the best of all the foods I tested. They lit easy and burned hot. These little wafer cookies actually burned really well, and the flame lasted forever.
Now, I bet a bunch of you are at home wondering, what is the point of lighting all this food on fire? Who's going to bring Fritos as a fire starter? And the truth is, I don't. You have much better fire starters that you can bring camping. But not everything goes according to plan. Sometimes you show up and you've forgotten your fire starter, or you run out of it. And then you're rummaging through your backpack or through the car or whatever, trying to come up with a plan B. And having all this knowledge can be really helpful in overcoming and adapting in those situations.
Top Ramen is a fire starter I've used quite a bit. It doesn't light very easy, but once it starts to burn, it burns hot and very long. I've used this when everything is wet or frozen. It's a great way to get icy wood burning. Saltine crackers, they work okay. They burn, but I actually like the wax paper wrapper much better as a fire starter. Fruit by the foot, the wax paper is actually a fabulous fire starter. It's just paper and paraffin. Burns like an absolute champion. Any food with a wax paper wrapper is going to be a great fire starter.
All right, next we're going to burn a cup of noodle.
No, my noodles! My noodles!
Let them go, Nathan. They're gone. They're gone.
Now, tea bags are kind of a funny fire starter. The bag itself will burn a little bit, and the outside of the wrapper will burn, which is often the case with tinfoil wrappers. But if you dip an old tea bag in any sort of flammable petroleum product, it actually makes a really good wick. Most cereals are flammable, but the more sugar they have on the outside, the less flammable they are. But these little packages are actually quite flammable. Styrofoam burns really well. And if you have a cereal with no added sugar, it'll actually burn half decent. Coffee filters work really well as a fire starter. You can use a ferrous rod to light a coffee filter on fire. Works pretty well. Duct tape actually burns pretty well. If you tear it up into little shreds, it makes a decent fire starter. I've, in the past, been able to start it using a ferrous rod, but you have to shred it extremely fine, and it's really difficult. Fishing line also works well, but you have to melt it down, much like you do pine tar, before it lights on fire.
Next, we're going to try burning marshmallows.
Yoink!
Okay, really quick, we're going to go through all the things that I tested that didn't work. Marshmallows, surprise, surprise, don't light on fire. Stale bread, no bueno. Tortillas, they actually worked okay. Not great, but okay. Rice Krispie treats, kinda. Moon pies taste good, but are a terrible fire starter. Kool-Aid doesn't work. Chapstick doesn't work at all, but the plastic does. Liquid nails, somebody told me this works. Totally doesn't. You can make fire with glycerin and other chemicals mixed together, but it doesn't burn on its own. Coffee mate burns at high temperatures, but it's a lousy fire starter. Vanilla wafer cookies were a dud. Pork rinds were forgettable. Graham crackers were a complete failure. Wheat thins were meh. Cheez-Its were a bit of a dud. So were the goldfish crackers. Animal crackers didn't work. Slim Jims didn't work, but the wrapper was actually quite flammable. Crayons, I melted it, and only the paper wrapper burned.
Well, guys, that's it. That's all I got to show you. And I've absolutely trashed my driveway doing it. But anyways, if you like that sort of video, definitely check out our other videos with all sorts of survival tips and tutorials, including how to build a fire without matches, like a whole bunch of different ways. We got a bunch of knot tying videos, and we've got survival fishing videos. I'll put links in the video description to all those different videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to click subscribe. We put out new adventure videos every Saturday morning.
If you like this video, don't forget to check out the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel where we have hundreds of videos just like this. And don't forget to click subscribe so you can see other great videos every Saturday morning. And hit that bell button so you'll get notifications. Thanks for watching.